Every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. You see that? You're going to be cast into the fire. You're going to go to hell if you don't do what? Verse 8, works of repentance. You see? If you don't do what? If you don't do verse 6, baptism, water baptism. And how many religions teach that? You see? But who is this for? Physical Jews during this time period. We're all the way over there again. Wrong group of people, wrong time period. You see? Let's also look at Matthew chapter 11, verse 12. Matthew 11, verse 12. And then we're also going to look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 23, all the way to chapter 5. I'm going to write the verses for chapter 5. I'm going to squeeze it 3, 20, and 22. All right? Hopefully the people online can see that. All right? Now, in this one, we're going to see kingdom of heaven, which is a physical kingdom. All right? Now, you're going to notice that throughout the Bible, during this first coming, during the ministry of Jesus and John the Baptist, the kingdom of heaven is mentioned a lot, right? Now, what you got to understand is the kingdom of heaven is not going to heaven. The kingdom of heaven, because remember, God is dealing physically, right? So it's going to be a physical, earthly kingdom. Remember the prophecy Messiah as king? That's what they were expecting, right? An earthly kingdom with an earthly ruler, you see? So during this, obviously, when this is preached, it was talking about an earthly kingdom and earthly ruler. Well, Pastor, how do you know that the kingdom of heaven is an earthly kingdom? That's not talking about going up to heaven. Well, let's first look at Matthew 11, verse 12. Let's first look at Matthew chapter 11 and verse 12. This has to be earthly. It cannot be something up in heaven. Matthew chapter 11, verse 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. How can that be heaven, up in heaven? The violent people on earth, they can't take away heaven. But it makes sense that they are fighting for what? A physical earthly kingdom. Right. That makes more sense, you see? So there's no doubt this has to be a physical earthly kingdom. But not only that, it makes sense it has to be a physical earthly kingdom because the Old Testament, there were too many prophecies talking about that. They were expecting that, you see? So there were so many prophecies about that. Now let's look at chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 3. Chapter 5, verse 3. Chapter 4 first. Chapter 4 and verse 23. Chapter 4 and verse 23. Notice that who is this going to be preached to then? It's not going to be spiritual Christians then, right? Because this is a physical earthly kingdom, not spiritual. So who's it going to be then? If you notice throughout this whole thing we talked about, it's going to be physical Jews, right? Because look at Matthew 4, verse 23. And Jesus went about all Galilee. You see that? Jews. Teaching in their synagogues. Well, that's definitely Jew. And preaching the gospel. Did it say the gospel of Jesus Christ? The gospel of Paul? The Christian gospel? No, it says the gospel of the what? Kingdom. You see that? Kingdom. That's expected, right? Because what? That's what they're looking for. Messiah as king. So Matthew chapter 4, verse 23, we see that. So he's preaching the gospel of the kingdom. So what's he going to preach? Look at Matthew 5, verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. All right? So Jesus Christ is preaching about the physical kingdom, right? That's the gospel of the kingdom. So earthly kingdom. Now notice the salvation plan of this earthly kingdom. Okay? Follow the context now. From verse 3, go all the way down to verse 20 now. Verse 20. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, he shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Look at that. So your physical work of being a good person has to exceed even the religious leaders, scribes and Pharisees. Wow, that's a lot of work, you see. Why? Because remember, God is dealing physically, and Jews are physical people. So it makes sense that physical works